Recording's already started. Nice. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started here in a couple minutes. So make yourself at home, get comfortable. We got folks dialing in. Good afternoon to you as well. Yeah, before we get started, we got a couple minutes, and always like for fun to find out where people are dialing in from. You should have access to chat, and we'll go over some rules here in a few minutes, but drop a line in chat where you're dialing in from. Omaha, Toronto, Arkansas, Germany, Qatar. Oh, wow. Japan. Nice. Love it. It's always fun when I do these webinars to find out where people are dialing in from. Couple California folks. Very, very good. Italy. Oh,
Oh, international. That's great.
very cool.
Yeah, we have Netherlands, we have Qatar. It's pretty much a global representation.
Oh, UAE. There we go. Well, we'll begin in about 2 minutes or so, give or take, give a chance for more folks to join. Then we'll kick it off. It's always that 1 or 2 minutes before something starts. It's like the longest 1 to 2 minutes ever. And so
I
you're
know,
like, wow,
awkward
that's a
silence.
right. I don't have any like onboard music. That's what we need to implement some on-hold music for everyone.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We should think about that for the next one.
I'll have to see if I can implement. I got a Stream Deck that I use, and that'd be actually with Zoom. I think you can have a second input for music.
We have a healthy number today. We have
Wii
around,
Sports theme. That's right. You know, the Wii Sports, like that's some classic music with the Wii for sure. Christian, you're saying how many folks we got? Oh wow, almost 60 folks in attendance today. So that's exciting. So glad to have everyone here. But yeah, we'll kick off in about a minute or so. Oh, actually, we're right on time. So we will get started here. So yeah, 1 minute. It is exciting. Well, we're excited. So I'm going to go ahead and begin and a couple house rules, and then we'll kick it right in. Welcome to today's webinar. We've got some chat. So if you have any questions, we do have a Q&A. So please, drop any questions you might have in the chat, and Smriti and I will, if you see me glancing over here to the right, I've got a second monitor so I can kind of see chat scrolling by. So if you have any questions, we'll do our best to answer those. And yeah, but this time is for you all to learn, and I'm glad you guys are all here. This is also being recorded, so if you have a coworker or you have to drop or something, we'll be able to have it hosted probably on our site somewhere where you can download it. So for those that are new, let's go ahead and begin and replace your legacy VPN with Tailscale. That's why you're here today. So let's go ahead and jump right in. My name's Alan Vailliencourt. I'm a solutions engineer over here at Tailscale. Been here for going on almost 2 years now, and been really exciting journey. Before that, worked at another couple startups, but it's spent about 15 to 16 years in the production world. And in that production world, I was a network admin, software developer, sysadmin, and I remember setting up my first VPN in like the early 2000s. It was this clunky box and we had to configure it. I don't even remember what brand or protocol it was. It was just kind of early stages, but very slow, very legacy. So we're excited to be able to talk about something of today's topic, what we're going to jump right into it. And I'm going to hand it off to Smriti. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll let you kick it off.
Awesome. Thanks, Alan. Hi, everyone. I'm Smriti. I'm a product marketing manager here at Tailscale. I'm about 7 months young or old, depending on how you look at it in the company and in the very exciting world of secure connectivity. As I learn more about Tailscale and especially the Tailscale community, I'm always amazed by the magical level of continued support that we get from our users. And this webinar is a step in that direction from Tailscale. We're here to talk about how Tailscale is a better alternative to legacy VPNs and how we can help companies grow as their needs grow. So in accordance to that, let's jump into the agenda. We're going to talk about a couple of common legacy VPN pain points. What are some experiences and what are some of the stories that we hear from our customers regularly? When is the right time to switch? When is the right time to start looking for an alternative? Alan is then going to jump into an introduction to Tailscale and talk a little bit about how Tailscale addresses all of those pain points. We're also going to talk about what our approach to secure remote access is and how we set you up for success, especially with zero trust. How do we get you on the path to implementing zero trust in your organization? We're going to touch a little bit on how you can start thinking about your migration. And then Alan is going to give an awesome demo and we're going to open it up to questions. So with that, I think, Alan, we can start. Perfect. So we all have experienced the pains of using a legacy VPN at some point. Slow connections, security concerns, performance issues, buying really centralized, expensive appliances that you have to then use to route all of your VPN traffic through, very complicated onboarding and offboarding procedures. These are just some of the many issues we've heard from our customers that they keep on running into with such services. Next slide, please. And then what ends up happening is you start adding layers of fixes to address a certain section of problems on top of layers of other older fixes that were put in to address various other problems. Before you know, you've created a complicated mess of VPN hubs and gateways and authentication layers and misconfigured firewalls. All of these were very well-intentioned solutions, but as time goes on, it just keeps on creating a bigger and bigger mess. Next slide, please. So then we think about, well, how do you know is the right time to start looking for a solution? If you're constantly hearing complaints about VPN issues or performance of things not being at the level that you expect, that's really the first red flag. If users are complaining about not being able to connect first thing in the morning when everybody logs on all at once, that's the first sign. And you count as a user too. If everyone is experiencing a problem and you are one of them, that's the first signal to you. Other factors to consider are things like compliance postures, data center migrations, or cloud migrations. There might have been a security breach, which happen much too often these days, Or maybe your business is growing with a large remote workforce, but your VPN is just not able to keep up. It just wasn't designed for that kind of growth. This is where Tailscale comes in. Alan, back to you.
All righty, thank you. So digging more into this, so I'm going to throw a poll up here, and I'm going to have it. Actually, I'll throw it here in a minute. I'm going to go through this slide. Talking about what Tailscale is for those that might be new to Tailscale. We operate on the layer three. So put on your network geek hats for those that love the OSI layer, the OSI model. And you can see where we operate on the layer three. We're a modern mesh networking tool that sits there and encrypts your traffic because it's built on WireGuard. But there are other tools out there, other VPN tools, the legacy systems that are out there. Others might introduce it on layer five. Some are on layer six, and then some, like an SSL VPN or something, is going to be maybe a layer seven along that line. So we take it and move it down to the network side of the fence, makes it a little bit more, robust, a little bit more native, a little bit good bit faster, at least from what our customers and what we have seen. So a few benefits of Tailscale in today, the hassle, and you'll see this in our demo, the hassle-free setup. As I mentioned earlier, where, I had this old legacy hardware tool or a firewall you have to implement, or I was talking to a customer earlier today where when they're setting up a VPN with their other customer, they have to mail configuration files back and forth. So there's a little bit more setup where Tailscale, it's really hassle-free for those that have used it. One of the big compliments we get a lot is like, oh, wow, I set an hour to do this and I finish in 10 minutes. I have 50 minutes back, and it's just seamless, and we've worked really hard. The security piece of that puzzle as well, which is very important in today's environment. End-to-end encryption is the default with everything on Tailscale. Again, built on WireGuard, which if you dig into the WireGuard protocol, a lot of modern, up-to-date cryptographic ciphers that are being leveraged. You're not putting your infrastructure exposed to the public internet. Tailscale will run these encrypted tunnels across the internet or whatever your connection is, but you're not exposing the chance of that information being compromised. And then a lot of integrations with native integrations, tools that work. All the major cloud providers, even with our application connectors, there's a lot of ways. And then we even got customers that are embedding Tailscale as part of their, technology stack. And then performance, again, one of the big things that you see a lot with a modern VPN, a modern tool like Tailscale, is built ground up for cloud native, remote hybrid, broadband, et cetera. So it's very high performance. And we have a number of engineers that literally that's kind of their job. They focus on the performance aspect. How do we make Tailscale faster and, to the point where, users just aren't noticing slowdowns? Because one of the pains, right, with legacy, someone's like, oh, I got a VPN. And then there's always this sigh because, it might not be the fastest tool. And if you're working from a coffee shop or from home or on vacation or somewhere, that, you kind of dread that experience and, because of something that might be legacy there. And so digging into this a little bit more, right? Reducing that infrastructure complexity where, if you have a legacy system, you have multiple hardware endpoints, different offices might have different configurations that are hardware. One of the things, some of our customers that have some legacy hardware device VPNs or firewalls that built-in VPNs, and you have different offices. So now you've got multiple versions of hardware out there and maybe multiple software, multiple configurations. Tailscale is a software-based tool, so there is no actual hardware. People like, hey, can I buy, a Tailscale hardware device? Well, we don't have it. It's software binary. Now there are hardware pieces out there that some of our integration partners, like OpenSense, pfSense, you can actually run Tailscale on some of those devices as well. Automating access and compliance, right? Integrating with your existing identity provider, which is critical. We don't store usernames and passwords. We leverage tools like, Okta and Google, Entra, and Jump Cloud, you name it. Infrastructure as tools. Today's environments with teams large and small, they're trying to automate, trying to do more with optimize how they're doing things. So whether they're using Terraform or Pulumi or Kubernetes, things like that. Same thing with GitOps of saying, hey, we use everything in Bitbucket or GitHub or some or GitLab. So how can we leverage some of those tools with CI/CD and the GitOps style for deployment? And then, minimizing network attack services. So Tailscale, and we have a blog article called talks about NAT traversal, how Tailscale works. But in short story, the TLDR, I guess you can say, is you don't, for the most part, most users and orgs don't have to open up any additional or any ports on their firewall. Tailscale uses NAT traversal techniques and to open those connectivities from known systems to another one to allow that direct connectivity without exposing, firewall ports that might be open or things that, someone might have set up. And a couple of things there you see at the bottom, we got SSH recording, there's log streaming, ACLs, we have a policy engine. So a few of those pieces that we'll tie into a little bit more. Some of our customers that, customer quote, so just we'll throw a few here, Instacart, as, probably people seen those commercials, leveraging Tailscale to solve some of the problems that they have, throughout their, environment as they grow. Um, then jumping back into setting up for zero trust, what does that look like? We hear the zero trust buzzword, it's been around for a while, but here at Tailscale, how we define it is a few things. Least privilege access, right? Users only get access to what they need at any given time. So Alice in accounting, when she signs on, doesn't by default have access to the whole network. She doesn't need to see the CI/CD server or maybe the file server for this project. You only grant and scope access as needed. Same with, connectivity, setting that up, saying, hey, leveraging that zero trust from a connectivity standpoint with things like continuous verification, device posture, things like that. So when, Alice signs up and fires up her laptop and it meets a certain security standard, if you have an integration with CrowdStrike or Sentinel or something along that line, that it can say, hey, is this user trusted based on our identity? Do they have the rights? Same with discovery and seeing that, and then our adaptive policy engine, which is part of our ACLs, that you can use things like just in time and use grants and really scope down access to a user. For those that have set up Tailscale and like a home lab, we have a default ACL that gives you access to everything. But as teams grow, you start tightening that down, saying, hey, we only need this team to have access to these servers, but we don't want this server to see this other server. So there's a lot of neat advanced things that you can do to make it tighter and make that integration tighter for sure. So zero trust, Tailscale versus what legacy solutions? Quickly here, a few things. Management, as we kind of talked about a little bit, large, can be costly, complex. This one customer I talked to has a lot of different hardware. They're coming up for a hardware refresh. They have multiple offices and they have multiple versions of hardware devices. So now as they get going, now they have to kind of figure out how do we scale all that. Whereas, Tailscale keeps it, fairly simple along that line. So you can start small and scale out. And we see this a lot with customers. They'll try it with one team, 3 or 4 folks, 5 to 10 folks, and then as they get comfortable with it, they start rolling it out and spreading it out for other teams within their environment. Infrastructure, really use the infrastructure you have today. So you have Proxmox, VMware, AWS, Google Cloud, you name it, you kind of own all that. So Tailscale just runs within that. There is no hardware or vendor lock-in along that line. API infrastructure as code, as I mentioned, we have a full robust API support for Terraform, Pulumi, GitOps. So kind of next generation automation that organizations are looking for to help manage a lot of what they have going on. And encryption versus, a man in the middle, a proxy system there that might be breaking encryption or going along that line. Whereas, end to end, when I'm connecting to a server, that's a full tunneled end to end encrypted. So it's inherently secure going along that line as well. And then deployment, we're mesh based. So, whereas it can be kind of everywhere. So if users are spread throughout the world, like all our users today in today's webinar, kind of all over the place, that Tailscale will grow and mesh and provide the best connection directly to wherever those resources are. So a little bit more ZTNA with Tailscale, right? Least privilege access. We talked about that a little bit. Connectivity. So applications, SSH databases, workloads, wherever those are, Kubernetes, IoT cameras, sensors, drones, aircraft, all kinds of stuff. If you can put Tailscale, if it's a network capable device, Tailscale can communicate with it more likely than not. Continuous verification, being able to look at the user's identity if something changed. So we have things like SCIM, the ability to pull a control or updates from the policy engine and immediately apply it to a user within a few seconds. Same thing, active insurance, where we have network flow logs and configuration logs that you can ingest into your SIEM of choice or a log tool like Cribble or Datadog or Splunk, things like that, where you can build telemetry. We're not a SIEM, we're not a CASB, but a lot of times those logs can be used to pinpoint activity or what might be happening, within certain environments. Discovery, the system mesh network devices can see devices based on rules and ACLs. And then lastly, our policy engine kind of talks about, hey, as you build those policies, those different groups, those different users, what that might look like along the line. Another quote here from Cribble, one of our customers, and we use it a lot for some testing. So, everyone wants IT, zero trust, but, the Cribble side was able to, leverage Tailscale a good bit to help out with some of their implementations there. So what does that look like when you're planning that migration? So, hey, how am I going to set up? I'm on a legacy system. How am I going to go forward? Well, we do it kind of small steps. In fact, good anecdotal customer I was talking to today, they're running an open VPN and they're looking to migrate, but things come up in blocks. So they say, hey, in the first whatever X amount of time, we're going to maybe migrate 10, 20, 30 users. And then as the next group of licenses or permissions start to expire, we're going to add that. With Tailscale, you don't have to say, oh, you can do a rip and replace and go full out, but you can do what we see a lot, people doing incremental approaches to deploying it, migrating things. You don't have to really purchase any new hardware. You can use your existing virtual machines, Docker containers, Kubernetes, Raspberry Pi, Apple TV. You don't have to buy specific hardware. We have some recommendations for cloud-based resources if you're spinning up on AWS and how to do that. But for the most part, you don't need anything new along there. Simple installation. You'll find if hopefully after today, if you're new and haven't done any of that, get a chance to do that. Enhanced security, WireGuard again, access controls through our ACL. And there's a link here at the bottom, and I'll make sure to go to it here. We'll put it in chat. Legacy VPN pre-migration. Just some ideas and steps saying, all right, I'm here today. I'm an overworked network admin or, IT or DevOps team and looking at something, that's not working well. How do I do that? So hopefully that link will be helpful there. All right. And then today, so people are like, well, why should I trust Tailscale? Who are you guys? Haven't heard of you. Well, we are a couple years old. We are Series B funded, and we have over 10,000 teams today. These aren't like, individual home users. We have way more, I think, when you add home users. But last report we got at our kickoff a few weeks ago is over 10,000 teams around the world are using Tailscale today in the day-to-day aspect of, leveraging it for remote access, secure access across the world. And there's a couple logos there as well. All right, so let's jump into that demo while I switch over here. I'm going to fire off this poll and it should be live. So we'll let that poll go for a little bit. And what VPN do you currently use today? Really curious. Cisco AnyConnect, Palo Alto, OpenVPN, Zscaler, Fortinet. All right, we got some answers coming in. It's going fast. Awesome. So I'm going to, oh, we're not questions yet. We haven't gone to the demo piece there. So while we're doing that, I'll let that run for a little bit more. And let me see if we have any questions here. We got a couple that have been answered already here. And so Tom, organization has 20 separate Google workspaces. Could SSO be set up to allow users to log in from each of those 20 Google workspaces? So that is what we call probably like a multi-telnet, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. That is something that is we're all working on to allow other identity providers and things like that. So this is a great blog article. I'm going to put this in chat as well. How Tailscale works, if you're really curious. This is actually written by our CEO, Avery. It's a couple years old, but the information is, I refer to it almost weekly, to be honest. It's like a permanent page on my browser because it gives you that idea when we talk about this traditional style and how it works, and and then the Tailscale methodology of going to it. But let's jump right in and kind of showcase Tailscale and the simplicity of it and show you all a couple features, logging into it, accessing a server via SSH, and some trickeries around that, and even some of our SSH recording. So on my client, I am connected here. You can see Tailscale is connected. This is my environment. And I have other tailnets because you can have multiple tailnets if you're a home labber or for work, for my case, work. So you can have other ones. And these are all isolated, separate network. Each tailnet has its own 100.xyz CIDR range, about 4.1 million IPs that you have access to within your tailnet. So that's a lot of devices that you can have. But in this one, I'm connected. And the reason I know is because this tells me, and I can access this little website that is only available to users on my VPN. So if I disconnect and say, you know what, I'm not connected to the telnet, guess what? That access to that internal HR application or dashboard or whatever it is gone. It turns red. My data is no longer flowing across the telnet because I'm no longer a part of this specific telnet anymore. So even if I refresh this, it's going to actually just basically give me a DNS not found because this site is only resolvable when I'm connected into my telnet itself. So let's go ahead and reconnect back into this. I'll refresh and it says, oh yeah, Alan, you're good to go. So we should be able to connect back into this. Mark said, is this funnel? No, this is not Tailscale funnel. This is just actually on my service itself. So I'm on the telnet. So this is like accessing a system. In fact, this server probably is an AWS server somewhere out there in the cloud. So what does it look like as a user going into it to access infrastructure or things along that line? Well, I can look at my machines, and this is the web panel. There's two pieces to Tailscale. We have the client application, which actually puts my local device on the telnet so I can see different devices. So these are my devices here or different tag devices that we have within our demo environment, right? And then you have a web admin page where for those that are sysadmins, network admins that are trying to configure Tailscale, this is, where a lot of times they'll spend, a bulk of your time unless you're using Terraform or infrastructure as code, because all of this can be managed through our APIs, through infrastructure as code, which is actually really, really nice. So I can see devices. I can see when they're connected. I can see different versions. They all have this 100.xyz IP address range on it. I can click on it and get some more information about these devices, different tags, because we use tags, which are key value pairs to help identify nodes within the telnet. And then we have things that are with what we call it with device posture, which is really critical. If you want to geo fence traffic or even know what versions, tying into a security system here, being able to use device posture and those kind of attributes can be really helpful. And then it has some health checks here to our derp fleet. So Tailscale runs a fleet of derp servers that are all throughout the world. And these are public stun turn servers that are leveraged by Tailscale clients. So when this device comes online, it's doing a heartbeat check to the different relay servers and health. You notice here, just flipped over here a minute, it says, oh, Ashburn, Virginia is closer than New York, but New York is its home derp. So this is great. Most time folks don't have to worry about this. For those that are, super kind of geeky into it, this is, a little bit more of the inner workings of what Tailscale is. And then let's jump into that policy engine. Right now, it's all JSON based, and so you can type, make changes within the system here live. Oops, don't want to do that one. You can use infrastructure code. You can use GitOps, and this is where a really good play of saying, hey, let's pull this into a GitOps method. For those that are not software developers or familiar with JSON or used to using a wizard, good news, there is a UI coming for this later on this year. So super excited about that because that's going to take some of this complexity and bring it to a little bit easier. So maybe you have someone that's on help desk that needs to make a change from a ticket, and it might be someone who's, entry level and they're maybe not super versed in JSON and a little intimidated, or they're afraid they might make a mistake. That web UI or the ability to manage ACLs with the UI is going to be, I think, really helpful along that line. Then some logs here, as I mentioned, that part of that, hey, what do I do with logging? What's going on? Well, for that zero trust piece of the puzzle, being able to say, hey, I want to know what's happening or information. We have two types of logs. We have configuration logs, or in this case, manages changes to the tailnet. So you can see a lot of it was me today doing testing and getting ready for the webinar. And then we have what's called network flow logs, which don't show here, but you can see they're streaming to Datadog. And so you can ingest and push these logs out to your SIEM of choice, being able to manage those from that aspect of it. So let's go ahead and connect to a machine here and show you what it looks like. I've got a tag machine here, a AV demo EC2. And when I look here on AWS, we can see that it's right here. So I've got this box right here. I do have one security group rule that's set up for access from my home IP address here, but I'm actually not going to be leveraging that. So no access to this box at all. In fact, I could even get rid of this IP rule here if I wanted to, and my access will still be granted. And we'll show you how that works here in a minute. So let's go ahead and kill this one. I'm gonna go ahead and save that. So technically, I've got a EC2 instance here that has no ability to have inbound connectivity to it. Outbound, I do want outbound because, hey, I want to make sure this box can get out there. So let me get back into it. Let's see here. AV, there it is. There's my box. So what does it look like from a Tailscale perspective and being able to access a system like this? Well, in this case, I can SSH in, and let me zoom in here a little bit because it's probably a little bit small for some folks there. So I can SSH in to this box using a tool like Tailscale. So remote access, if I'm a software developer or a network admin. It's like, so how do I get to it? Maybe I don't have the key to it, but I need access. Well, I can use Tailscale and I can actually just SSH in with the name of the box. I don't even have to know its IP address. So when I do this, it's going to authenticate me. And I did this earlier, so it didn't fire up a profile. But if I hadn't authenticated, I have a check mode set in my ACL that'll say, hey, let's verify that Alan is who he says he is. And let's go ahead and sign you in. Now I'm on this box and I can do my work as I need it. I can see Tailscale net check. I can see information about my client. I'm doing all this work without exposing any ports. I have a direct encrypted, end-to-end encrypted tunnel to this EC2 server that's on AWS in Virginia somewhere. And I'm able to access this, do the work that I need to do it based on my access control list. So what happens is if we say, hey, Alan doesn't need access to this box anymore, let's go ahead and kill him. So let me find our SSH rules here. And this is where that piece where I talked about that kind of zero trust or tying it into an Okta group or a SCIM group. So in this case, I'm part of the solutions engineering group here. And we can see here, Alan is in there. So what happens if I'm on this box doing work and my access gets revoked? So let's hit save and let's see what happens. Within seconds, my access is now gone. If I try to get back into there, sorry, you're no longer part of the group. A policy change happened within the network, or your rights, or you inadvertently were given access. And this can apply to any device. SSH is just super easy to showcase about, Windows RDP, database access to different things, subnet routers, pieces like that, which prevent immediately to block access based on a policy rule or policy change. And then you could tie in tools with what we call just-in-time access. So maybe I don't have access to this, but then I can use our API and use just-in-time to, manage access into that. All right, I'm going to pause here. I'm going to end the poll because I forgot about it. And all right, there's our results. So we got a lot of Open VPN, Cisco AnyConnect, some Palo Alto, Cloudflare, Zscaler, Fortinet, Pri-tunnel, Pre-tunnel, Ivanti, TwinGate, and other. I'm curious on the other, if you want to drop in chat what that other is. If it's like AWS SSM or something. Okay, NetBird, Pi VPN. Okay, so other tools are out there. So you can see there's other, someone says other equals Tailscale. That's true. It could be very well like, yeah, it's true. We did not have Tailscale on that. So yeah, other could definitely so and we got someone using Headscale. Okay, so yeah, that is definitely super geeky guys there leveraging that. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get my access back to this box here. Let me see here. I'm gonna save it. And I should be able to gain access. Boom, I'm back in. So the system's like, oh yeah, you're part of that group, so we're gonna let you back in and do that work. And one of the cool things tying into this with the SSH, I don't know if you noticed that when I first joined, there's a little banner prompt said, hey, this session's being recorded. Because we have the ability with Tailscale SSH along that line is to use what's called session recording. So we do session recording with Kubernetes aspects of it. So if you're doing a kube exec into a pod or SSH, you can actually record this. So what does that look like from a customer standpoint? Well, as an admin or security team, you're like, hey, I need to look at, so what did Alan just do? Well, again, this is another device that lives within your infrastructure. Again, Tailscale doesn't own this, cannot see this. This is something that, you as a individual or your company would set up within your tailnet. But you can have a session recorder to record these. In this case, these are actually stored on S3. These recordings, they're recorded in ASCII cinema format. So it's a .cast file. So I could actually go back and replay what might be happening within my telnet. In this case, maybe for training, incident response or post-mortem or something like that, you can leverage, Tailscale to, record those instances. And the nice thing is someone's like, hey, who logged in as, Ubuntu or root on a box and, did an RM-RF on root or whatever it is, right? Everyone's gonna be like, hey, it wasn't me, it wasn't me. Well, guess what? With Tailscale, we know who it was because there's my user that's signed in and we know which sources. Oh, hey, Alan, that was you signing in from your MacBook Pro device. And it was you because you signed in as the Ubuntu user and along that line. So we can have this visibility into, activity that's happening within your telnet along that line. Some other ones there. Someone said Twin Gate is another one that they had there. So okay, cool. So Twin Gate, Tailscale, Headscale, a few other cool pieces there. We'll have to add that to our poll later on if we, do this again, going forth, for sure. So those are, high level. So, Tailscale say, but what if you say, hey, cool, I don't do SSH. Maybe I need access to applications. Or in today's environment, we're using, whitelist IP ranges to access a database, or we want to network control access to certain databases or to applications, things along that line. Well, we've got a solution for that, and it's called our app connector. And this allows your users to keep the workflow as normal. Hey, if I need to get to Salesforce or GitHub or whatever it is, I can still do it without changing my day-to-day workflow versus like, oh, I now have to go to this URL or do this specific thing. So, for example, if I wanted to get to a Mongo cluster I have in Atlas and do it via Tailscale, what does that look like? So, well, I can sign in and then it's going to look and say, oh yeah, Alan is now on his Mongo cluster. I can access and see my Mongo databases. So my workflow didn't change as an end user. How do we do this? We do that with a feature, part of Tailscale called our application connector, our app connector, which allows you to route traffic through Tailscale based on ACLs, etc., into applications. So in this case, I have it set up to access a Mongo cluster. On that Mongo cluster, I actually have a network access control list that is basically only allow access coming from Tailscale itself. If it's coming from anywhere else, it will not work. So I just turn off my tailnet. I'm going to try to connect my local client, ask for the password. I'm going to hit return. And it's going to sit there. In about a minute, it'll time out because on the Mongo Atlas side, there's an ACL saying, ooh, I don't recognize your IP address because my IP address, according to Mongo, is 47.7.231.93. I'm here in South Carolina. So it doesn't recognize that as an approved IP address because in my access control list, I only allow it and set it for certain IPs. And so again, that's another way customers can take and leverage Tailscale, access some of these apps they might have out there without breaking the workflow for their users. They can keep doing things as it is. So let's reconnect to that. And you notice it did time out. So if I try to connect again, it'll actually work. The other app I had here is IP Chicken. So notice I had my home IP, but now if I refresh it, it should have my new IP. There it is, it's thinking. We'll give it a minute or so. Hopefully I didn't break something there. But it should pull up my new IP address or my Tailscale IP. There it is, because it's routing all that traffic through what we call an app connector. So there's a lot of flexibility when you look at a connectivity tool. Tailscale is a VPN to replace those business use cases, but then brings a whole lot more to the table with those additional layers of security, zero trust, and things along that line. Let me pause for a minute here and take a look at some questions here. Let me see what we got here. Robert, MSP program. So you are on the right Zoom. So I actually help out with our partners and channels page, partners and channels team. So we do have an MSP program. So if you go to, I believe Tailscale partners right here, partnership. There's a link there, fills out a form. Our team will get it and we can have that conversation. But you're right. We don't, we're early stages with our partnerships, but we do have a lot of excitement, a lot of folks leveraging it. So we're more than happy to, talk to you about that for sure. Is Tailscale hiring anonymous attendee? Well, we are a full remote company, so we're based out of Toronto, and I'm in South Carolina. We have employees all over the world. You can check our careers page. I have no insight into that for sure there. So. Let me see here. Licensing for IoT devices. How can I use the same user for all my devices? So Tailscale has that concept, and we'll segue into that real quick here of a user-owned device versus a kind of Tailscale-owned device. You notice some of these devices here in my environment have tags on them. And then when I look here in my device panel, I got some that don't have or doesn't have. This is my phone or a browser extension, an Alpha MVP product here. But it gives you Tailscale when you sign in with your username. That's what we call like a user-owned device. Tag devices are devices owned by the Tailnet itself. And what that enables you, typically those are like servers and things like that. So if you're saying, um, hey, I've got IoT devices, you could you use the same user? You could, but what happens is if that user leaves the company or their access gets revoked, all those devices will consequently lose their access to it. But we're pretty generous. I think every Tailscale plan has a minimum of 100 devices to that, plus you get more 10 or 20 per user based on how many users you have. So there's definitely opportunity to add more. But if you have more questions on that, we do have bulk pricing because we have some customers that are like, oh, there's only 100 of us engineers, but we got 5,000 IoT devices. And so we have our sales team can help have that conversation around how that would work. Let me see here. This is a
There's
full
one,
tunnel.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's one more question, Alan, and this seems to be a current user. Spiridon had this question. We have a couple of clients who have their own Tailscale network. Can we somehow share it without the main one?
So you have customers that have Tailscale and they were sharing devices within the Tailnet to you all. Was that my understanding? Oh,
Um,
you manage their Tailscale networks. So yeah, I mean you can, definitely do that. You can manage that and how that would work from, kind of like that. Hey, I've got customers, they can invite you as a user into their Tailnet. So you would sign in as an external with your current IDP or username, but you manage them all in dashboard instead of change. So we do not have, that's part of our MSP. We do not have like a MSP dashboard today. It is something that is being built and iterated on, and hopefully later on this year we'll be able to have that. But today our customers tend to use fast user switching. So if you have, customer A, customer B, customer C, that you can switch between their tailnets. And then from the admin panel, you just, you can, with multi-tailnet, this is what it looks like here, but being able to, you have to log out, log into their tailnet to manage it. We don't have that kind of single pane dashboard for MSPs and partners, but it is something that we're working on for sure. Let me see here. I think, for the most part, high level, hopefully this kind of covered a lot of Tailscale. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with it. A lot of neat things that we see customers running with Tailscale, you know, kind of iterating that we're on a legacy system, looking at the poll where there's a lot of uh, Open VPN. And one of the pains that this customer even told me today is that they have to have these configuration files emailed to their different users. And if there's a change, they got to make that change. Whereas the Tailscale configuration piece is all handled from, the admin side, whether using our ACL, like Terraform or GitOps or putting it here, these updates get pushed out to the client. So from a client configuration, there's really no profile to set up. You just install Tailscale, you get it up and running. You don't have to reconfigure something. And Tailscale is really good as a set it and forget it type of network where, I could have this up and running and I just don't worry about it and it just runs all the time. So if I'm here today and I go to a coffee shop tomorrow, I just fire up my laptop, Tailscale automatically reconnects and I'm able to do the work that I, need to do as needed. All right,
there's
let me
one more question,
see.
Alan.
Yes.
David says we have a simpler problem, he thinks. Our infrastructure is MS365 and Azure. Currently, we are in our own office with an ISP and our own network. 6 weeks, we moved to a WeWork type office with a shared Wi-Fi. And they're asking, we need Tailscale, don't we?
Yes, you can. I mean, Tailscale going from an office, and if you want to access those devices in that traditional office, and you're doing it from a WeWork or whatever, then yeah, Tailscale would be a great fit for something like that because you can have it running on your file servers, print server, or file servers, your networks within your office. Have Tailscale working. You go to the coffee shop, WeWork or whatever it is, fire it up, and you'll see them as they were. We use what's called, whether Tailscale's running on it or through a subnet router is one way to gain access to it. So, for example, here in my demo, I can ping a Class A non-internet routable IP address. This lives on one of my servers on AWS. So I route it across the public internet because I'm using what we call subnet routers that broadcast access to, different CIDR ranges. So if you have a print server, and I use this story, last year I was traveling, our sales kickoff, and my wife called me, needed something printed up in our printer, and was like, "Oh, I got this." So from the hotel in Seattle, I connected to my telnet here at my house, and I sent a print job to my printer. I couldn't put Tailscale on my printer, but I have a subnet router running, so I was able to send the print job across the public hotel-wide internet, through a house, all securely encrypted. And I said, "Hey, check the printer, your print job's on it." So those are ways, and we work remote locations definitely would work no issue at all.
Perfect. Bunch more questions coming in. Um, Jacob is very curious about the expected connection speed of an established Tailscale session versus a plain WireGuard session. Is there
Oh,
typical,
yeah,
yeah,
like what's the, speed of Tailscale over WireGuard? So I'm going to reference, let me see here. We have a blog post by, let me see here, Jordan Whitehead, one of our performance engineers. So this talks about some performance stuff, and I think it links here to our post one. Oh, not that one. And post two, surpassing 10 gig over Tailscale. So I'm going to put the link to this in chat because it's a really cool some performance, stuff that we're always tweaking. So there will always be an overhead, right? Encryption has an overhead, encrypting, decrypting, everything. And what we've seen is, and this article talks a little bit about, performance along that line, but in our SEs, when we do some testing along that line, we'll spit up, we'll find out if you're running Tailscale on a micro instance on AWS and you're trying to send a ton of traffic through it, it's going to get CPU bogged down pretty heavily, pretty fast, and your performance will suffer. And we notice that if you scale up and have a bigger CPU, more CPU IOPS on that line, it's going to perform better and have better performance because that's where a lot of the bottleneck can tend to happen. But from a plain wire guard, there's a little bit of overhead, but uh, I think performance wise, it'll probably work really, really well for you.
perfect.
Yeah.
Trolls is curious about, they have clients that have their own VPN, FortiClient or Global Connect, things like that. Can they use Tailscale in addition to avoid using their VPN? And I think they're talking as a
Yes.
web agency.
Yeah. So we don't recommend running two VPNs simultaneously. The reason being is that they will both fight for the same interfaces and networking kind of routes. You can have multiple VPNs like Tailscale and Fortinet on a computer. And a lot of times our customers will run that way, especially if they are migrating. So they've got, hey, I need to connect to this, I'll fire up Fortinet. But if you turn off Fortinet, Tailscale turn on, no issues at all. Turn off Tailscale, turn on Fortinet, no issues. But if you have both running at the same time, it can work, but there's a good chance we've gotten a lot of anecdotal conversations and evidence from our customers that running both multiple VPNs at the same time will probably cause some headache for sure. Not recommended. Let me see here. I see a question here in the Q&A. We've got understand how apps can block users from accessing third-party SaaS like GitHub without Tailscale. How does that work? Yeah, so in my illustration here, obviously GitHub is a public, repository, so I can go to GitHub. But a lot of times, certain companies and certain apps and places have the ability to only allow connectivity from known endpoints, especially if it's a certain login page. Like, hey, we're going to only allow access to our GitHub Enterprise through, tailscale.github.com or whatever it is. But we all want to make sure those are known connections from a certain. So that's how you can manage it. And so we have a few here from a illustrative and demo purposes, and there's even some preset apps that you can run out there. And so those are ways, maybe everyone just general can go to Jira, but if you want to get to our company Jira instance, it has to go through an app connector because we're going to deny connections across anything else. So hopefully that answered that for you there. Let me see another one here. Some clients have their own VPN Fortinet to avoid using. Okay, some client, I think that maybe that was the question I just answered. Has their own VPN Fortinet or Global Connect. Can we use Tailscale in additional to avoid using their VPN for us web? So in that case, in that question, maybe I missed that. If they say, hey, in order for you, you're an agency connecting to our resources as a customer, you're kind of adherent to what they tell you to do. Now, if you have the ability to, hey, we use Tailscale. Have you guys considered using Tailscale? And you can influence them to try it out. But if they say, no, we only use this and you have to install it, there's no way for you to kind of reverse back into it unless they give you access to a server and then you could put Tailscale on that server and just use that. But please check with their security team, their IT team, because I used to work at an agency and sometime at a development agency, and sometimes customers are like, "Oh, we don't care. That's your box. It's on our network. Do whatever you want." So they give you full reign. But others are like, "You can only access it using our VPN and our tool." So you don't want to get in trouble, but that is something, a conversation that you could probably, have with them for sure. Let me see here. We got about 5 or 6 minutes left here. Let me scroll through chat because we had a couple questions come here in chat as well. Jacob, CPU bottlenecking. When deploying an on-prem Tailscale server, assuming a large number of connections, would a high base CPU clock be better to minimize the chance bottlenecking, or is greater parallelization more cores? Probably a high CPU piece there. Let me see here. We have an AWS reference architecture, and we kind of highlight on that a little bit. Let me see here, what we kind of recommend from a machine or core standpoint, because it talks a little bit about that right here. In general, clock speed is more important than more cores. So you're asking about that would be for sure more cores. And this is now with AWS from us seeing a lot on the AWS side, non-burstable type, and even mentions a few there. So it's all going to vary, but definitely clock speed probably more than the core itself. So, all right. Red theme on Chrome. Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's my way to differentiate the different profiles I have for running uh, demos, etc. Let me see here. Smriti, anything I missed? Anything on your end as we kind of wind down here today?
Yeah, I think we answered pretty much all the questions. I'm trying to see if we haven't. Um, yeah, Sparadon has this question. How can we implement Tailscale in a government network who have denied outbound rules as their own because they have their own backbone? Also, do exec nodes work as a router?
Government network. If you're talking, wow, that's a great question. Denied outbound rule, their own backbone. So if they're specifically blocking Tailscale, and there's a couple ports on Tailscale that you can potentially open up, like 41641. But if they are blocking it completely at all, there's not a lot that can be done with that. It'd be the chance to maybe have a conversation with their security team to be like, hey, can we have an exception for Tailscale? Here's why we use it. It's fully encrypted. It's not a privacy VPN like Nord or Proton or something like that. It's a remote access zero trust tool, and maybe those kind of conversations there. Does an exit node work as a router? So an exit node can work as a subnet router. Probably not necessarily recommended. It's just really Tailscale is one binary, so it's a command flag. An exit node, and for those that might not be familiar, an exit node is allowing all your traffic to egress through a known endpoint. So it turns Tailscale into a full tunnel VPN in essence. So I can run exit node east, and right now all my traffic is routing through instead of my local ISP, it's now routing 100% through that exit node. And we also have the ability to tie into Molvad. We have a Molvad partnership. So if I want to run all my Exynos traffic through Frankfurt, Germany, I just did. So if I go to, Google, it's actually routing this. Well, there you go. I had no idea what that is because that's in German and it says, "Hey, what are you doing? You're coming from Tailscale." So there you go. I just routed that. So you can run an Exynos subnet router on the same VM, same device, and it should operate well. We do recommend from a best practices that you kind of separate, isolate those. Hey, this is our exit node VM or Docker, whatever, and this is our subnet router one. It'll just, I think, make life a little bit less of a headache for you as a networking engineer. I'm gonna go back to no on this one so I get back to US traffic. There we go. And let's see here, because we only have a few minutes left, so I want to be cognizant on that time and apologize if we did miss a question or two here. Possible to have a different DNS server per host via the ACL. Today, no. Our DNS is handled through obviously the DNS panel, and you can have different name servers, you can add search domains, but through specific hosts, that's a request that's come through. Not currently available today, but that is something our team has looked at in the past, or as a potential feature. VM or container, thanks. And one more, can the Tailscale negotiator provide a demo for them instead of us or group explanation government? Yes, more than happy to. Spiridon, if you want to set up a follow call with our sales teams, we're more than happy to talk to your customer on your behalf either through our partners team, or even if they can get on the call, our SE team is super, super smart and can help answer those questions and even demo what Tailscale is. Yeah, more than happy to do so for sure. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm looking, I think we've caught up pretty much. A couple here. Oh, one more question. I've removed my security group for the EC2 instance. How does Tailscale allow block behind the scene even without the security group? Can you explain it further? Yeah, so it's really using it on our policy engine, our access control list. So we have an ACL or SSH that said, hey, anyone in this group, in my case, Alan in the uh, solutions engineer group, has access to SSH things that are tagged because I have that device tagged. And Tailscale is running on that EC2 instance as well as my client here. And so when it sees those, Tailscale uses what's called Tailscale SSH, which kind of overlays its own SSH daemon in essence over Tailscale and uses WireGuard keys that it creates temporarily to allow that access. So that's kind of how it handled in a nutshell. If you look at Tailscale SSH in our documentation, I think there's a little bit deeper technical explanation on that piece there. So, all right, folks. Well, we got about a minute left, so I want to be cognizant of the time. Oh, last question. Features until end of 2025. I do not believe we have a public roadmap, but you can check. But if you talk to one of our sales teams, then we can probably get something going there. So, thank you all very much. I appreciate you stopping by, whether it's the evening, morning, or afternoon. And thank you for your interest in Tailscale and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thanks, everyone. This was a great session.